Good morning, everybody. This is Richard Bernhardt. I'm with Streakwave Wireless. We're very pleased to have you in another edition of Streakwave Webinars. It's my great pleasure today to have with me a leading line in the wireless industry and a specific presenter who knows an awful lot about this line. It's my pleasure to introduce John Butler. He's the Senior Products Manager for Cambium Networks and is now currently responsible for the entire ePMP product line. John has an extensive background in engineering and management positions and has been with Cambium Network for a while and has a lot of information about this particular product. Before we begin the presentation and I turn it over to John, I wanted to go over a couple of different things about the product line and where you can access it. Streakwave is a broadband and wireless value-added distributor. We are a source for ePMP and all Cambium products, as well as a full line of other manufacturers and all broadband wireless products. So if there's something that you need to complete a project or something that you have a question about in your business, please feel free to give us a call. You can always reach Streakwave at streakwave.com as our website, or at 888-604-5234. Today we're going to be concentrating on a fairly new product. This product's been out, John will tell you that it's probably been about a year, but it's gone through some major revisions and is really, really working well. And we're pleased to now have this product line in our portfolio. So I'd at this point like to introduce John Butler and turn it over to John to discuss the ePMP line. Welcome, John.
Thank you, Richard. Glad to be here and glad to have this opportunity to talk about Cambium and the ePMP. For those people on the call who may not be familiar with Cambium Networks, I'll just provide a brief introduction. So we're a company that has been independent of Motorola since 2011. Prior to that, we were part of Motorola. And we're a leader in providing wide area outdoor wireless solutions, both point-to-multipoint and point-to-point. Throughout our history, we've sold more than 4 million radios into over 150 countries, and we think that we have unique capabilities and experience to develop industry-class solutions to meet your needs. The major lines within our portfolio, we start with our point-to-point radios, which have been marketed under the brand name Orthogon. And these are leading solutions for a backbone of your network in unlicensed spectrum. We have a unique capability we call dynamic spectrum optimization that allows the radios to find the best portions of the spectrum in which to operate on. And we are often selected for the most challenging links worldwide. The other line in our portfolio is the Canopy line, which has been a market leader in the access networks. It's ideal for enterprise, residential access, as well as delivering voice, video, and data. And then the newest part of our portfolio is the ePMP, which is what I'm going to cover today. What we did with the ePMP is that we took everything we've learned from our 10 years in the business selling and deploying Orthogon and Canopy networks, and we applied that to a very low-cost platform. And what we deliver with that platform is affordable scalability and reliability. And at the end of the session today, I think you'll have an appreciation for what makes this solution unique in the marketplace.
John, I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second just to remind the audience, because there's a lot of information here. If you have a question throughout this presentation, there's a section next to your control panel that says questions. Please feel free to type in digital questions throughout. We'll have a Q&A session at the end to answer any questions that you have. Thank you, John.
Thank you. So we had some goals that we wanted to achieve when we developed the ePMP product line. We saw that there were some applications where the Canopy or the Orthogon products may not have met the right price to give the customers the right return on investment. So we needed certainly to hit a price point with the ePMP product. The CPE needed to be low priced, needed to sell to the end user below $100 US. And then the access point equipment, we wanted to price it in such a way that a network operator could deploy the access point equipment, have a relatively low number of subscribers on it in a low, what we call ARPU, or average revenue per user scenario, and get payback on that equipment in less than 6 months. So we definitely had to make sure that it was priced right. And then in terms of features, we needed the radio to be, each radio to be capable of performing any of the functions of an access point, a subscriber module, or a point-to-point radio. And then for the 5 gigahertz version, we needed a wideband radio that would cover all of the frequency bands within a single radio. 2x2 MIMO support in 20 and 40 megahertz channels was essential for high performance. And then because we didn't want it to be just another Me Too solution in the low price category, we worked very hard to make sure it incorporated what we call our signature capabilities that are in Cambium's, all of Cambium's point to multipoint solutions. And those capabilities, and I'll go through each one, are that it supports GPS synchronization, and this allows for frequency reuse, and so very high density, high spectrally efficient deployments. Have high scalability and performance consistency, meaning that you can grow your network to have many sites, and each site supporting many subscriber modules, and the performance will remain consistent. And then we needed the capability also to deal with external interference, because these products are deployed in unlicensed spectrum. There are oftentimes many users of that spectrum, and so the algorithms within the product need to be robust so that we get good performance in the face of external interference. And in addition to that, so once you have those foundations, then if we support an effective QoS scheme, which will allow network operators to deliver prioritized voice, data, and video. And then eCommand is a suite of tools that we have that help you plan, provision, and monitor your network. And finally, while this product is low cost, we designed it according to our quality process so that it will be a robust and reliable solution. Let's talk about the solution overview. So it's a set of radios and antennas that are available in both the 5 gigahertz band and the 2.4 gigahertz band. For the radios, we have essentially 3 different radios. We have one which is our GPS synchronized radio. So this has an embedded GPS receiver that gets the precise timing from the GPS system that's needed to run a GPS synchronized network. And then we have unsynchronized radios, which can be the clients in a synchronized radio or the masters in an unsynchronized solution. We have a new product that we've introduced recently and will be starting to ship in the coming weeks. It's called the ePMP Force, where we combine our connectorized radio with a very high gain antenna for very long applications and high applications that need a high system gain. We have a set of sector antennas that go along with the access point. And then our integrated radio can also be equipped with an optional reflector dish, which increases the gain of the radio. So that's the radio platform. And the platform is based, the radios are based upon an 802.11n chipset, which is a Wi-Fi chipset that helps us maintain a low cost. And while it's based on Wi-Fi technology, it is not actually Wi-Fi. We've completely rewritten the software at the protocol layer called the MAC layer, which is something that's needed to be done with Wi-Fi based solutions when you want to deploy them in wide area outdoor scenarios. In addition to that, we have a graphical user interface that helps you manage and monitor the system, as well as an element management system that's available for download free from our website to manage the whole solution. As I mentioned, the radios can be deployed in a variety of configurations. Each radio can be an access point, a point-to-point radio, or a subscriber radio, just simply by checking a selection box in the graphical user interface. So you can have synchronized and unsynchronized point-to-point links and synchronized and unsynchronized point-to-multipoint solutions. The two different radios have different interconnection capabilities. The GPS synchronized radio has a gigabit Ethernet port that is also standard PoE compatible, 802.3 AF, and it has a connection to an external GPS antenna that helps you get better reception from the GPS timing. The unsynchronized radios both have two fast Ethernet ports. There's a main port where the radio receives data and power to it, and then there's an auxiliary port where a secondary device can be connected to that port for additional connectivity. The sector antennas are specifically designed for the ePMP. The radio mounts directly to the back of the antenna with a single screw which holds it on mechanically, as well as providing grounding mechanism. There's adjustable mounting brackets, and then there's a slot at the top of the antenna where you can put the GPS antenna for a nice clean installation. I talked about the reflector dish, so this is an optional device that you can deploy along with the integrated radio, and it raises the aggregate gain of that radio up to about 19 dBi. So that's a 6 dBi gain at 5 gigahertz and 7 dBi at 2.4 gigahertz. And then the ePMP Force 100, the new product, which we announced about 6 weeks ago, and it's starting to ship now. What this is we've combined the connectorized, unsynchronized radio with a custom-designed high-gain dish antenna. So the dish and the radio come together at a very attractive price, and they have everything you need to deploy a high-gain radio. So that's the ePMP Force. Just quickly, the solution specifications, these are the highlights, and we have more detail on the individual product spec sheets, which are available for download from either the Cambium or the Streakwave site. But the 5 gigahertz frequency band supports the entire range of 5 gigahertz in a single radio, and the 2.4 supports that entire band as well. The headline throughput is over 200 megabits per second in a 40 megahertz channel, and we can support up to 120 subscriber modules. We do tests on a regular basis of actually 120 subscriber modules, all transferring data, because scalability is one of the key capabilities of the solution. In the 5 gigahertz band, the exact frequencies that you can access depends upon where you are in the world. But in the U.S. and in Canada, there's the 5.8 band, the 5.2, and the 5.4 band, and very recently the 5.1 band, as we call it, which is 5150 to 5250 megahertz. That's very recently been opened by the FCC, and the ePMP was one of the first radios to receive an FCC grant to support that. So one radio can be deployed in any of those frequency spectrums. Very low power consumption. We have a wide operating temperature range. And then the antenna gains are listed here. So integrated antennas are 12 to 13 dBi, depending on the frequency, all the way up to 25 dBi for the ePMP Force. So that's the solution. Now let's talk about what makes it different. I listed all of these capabilities and briefly went through them before, so I won't repeat that here. But I'll dive into each one of these capabilities and tell you how it works and what it can do for you when you deploy this solution. So how does GPS synchronization work? A lot of people talk about it, but it needs to be explained a bit. So GPS synchronization is a way for you to deploy multiple access points either on the same tower or on separate towers where they can see each other. And they operate in a way where they don't interfere with each other, and you can reuse frequencies. Now, why that's important is that the spectrum that you can deploy solutions in is oftentimes very limited. And so if you can reuse the available spectrum, then you can get more capacity out of your system. You can support more subscribers if you are a WISP, make more money, and you can support more cameras if you're deploying a video surveillance solution and have a more effective solution. But the way it works is there's three capabilities that have to be built into the radio. One is that the transmissions and the receptions of the radios all have to be synchronized to each other, so that there is never a scenario where one radio is transmitting at a high power and there's a nearby radio that's trying to listen. The solution also has to control the transmit power of the subscriber modules. We want to make sure that they're transmitting just at the power level that's needed to achieve optimal data transmission, but no higher. And this is a very effective way to keep down self-interference in the network. And then what you need is you need antennas that are very high quality, that have good isolation between the front amplification and the attenuation of the signals in the rear of them. So they have what's called a high front-to-back ratio. And when you combine all of these capabilities in a system, what you can do is you can do frequency reuse. So if you deploy a single 4-sectored site, for example, you can do that with 2 channels, whereas unsynchronized solutions need 4 channels. And they also need to have what's called guard bands between them, basically wasted spectrum between them. And then if you deploy a tightly packed contiguous network of cells, you can do that, the entire network, without any limitation with just 4 channels. And there's really no other solution on the market that can do this today. Only if they support true GPS synchronization with those capabilities I mentioned can you do frequency reuse like this. So we have a whole white paper on GPS synchronization and how that actually can turn into a lot of money for a WISP deploying a solution. And that's available for download at the Cambium website. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you want to learn more about GPS synchronization and how that can improve your business. Scalability is something that we've worked very hard to make sure the ePMP supports. We support scalability in the first instance is the ability to put up multiple access points and have them not interfere with each other. So that's GPS sync. And then the ability for a single access point to support as many as 120 SMs simultaneously transferring data is something that we've worked very hard to make the ePMP be able to support. And how do we do that? We do that by building on top of the frequency reuse and no self-interference of GPS sync. We have 2 capabilities that allow us to scale. One is that our protocol for communicating with the subscriber devices is very efficient. And then we have a very sophisticated scheduler. And a scheduler is software that runs on the access point and decides which of the clients get bandwidth. The MAC protocol is very efficient because we talk to multiple devices at the same time on the downlink, so we don't waste bandwidth there. And then on the uplink, we use a capability that's called transmit timing advance, which is a capability that we've borrowed from the 4G cellular systems that allow us to tightly pack transmissions from multiple devices on the uplink. So when you have a very efficient protocol, you can expand your system to support lots of different client devices. If your protocol is not efficient, then once you scale up, the system really runs into some limits. And then the scheduler is very important too, to make sure that we're allocating resources in a smart way that maximizes the capacity of the system and doesn't allow a few what we might call bad client devices that are in bad RF conditions from dragging down the whole system. So that's GPS synchronization and scalability. Those are very important capabilities. Within the last 3 months, we've introduced a new capability to the ePMP that we call eFortify. And this is some enhancements to it that allow the product to perform, still have high performance even if you're in high interference environments. So we understand that GPS sync by itself is not enough in order for us to have a good, robust solution in the, when deployed, especially in areas where there's a lot of congestion. It's the foundation for a good performing system, but it's not enough. And so eFortify builds on that to allow the system to have good performance under high interference conditions while still maintaining consistent latency. Now, how does that work? So again, all these things build on each other. What we've done is the MAC protocol efficiency and the airfairness adaptive scheduler that allow us to achieve high scalability also help us the benefits from those capabilities are really kind of multiplied when you run into high interference. And then we've added to that rate adapt algorithms that are optimized for interference conditions. And what we did, and this takes quite a bit of work and testing and tuning, is that the interference that you typically run into when you're deployed in some spectrum along with other solutions is very bursty in nature. So you have to make sure that the radio is making the right choice between choosing, say, lower modulations to help it blast through interference or recovering through retransmissions. And we found just the right solution with the eFortify capabilities. To give you an example of the improvements we've made in the product, we have this chart here that basically shows the performance of the ePMP in varying interference levels. And when we first released the product, we had a modest advantage over competitive offerings in terms of dealing with interference. And this was really primarily came from the GPS synchronized protocol we implemented. But once we implemented better rate adapt algorithms through eFortify, we saw some significant improvements in performance. When you get to the moderate and high performance levels, the improved ePMP with release 2.0 achieves 2 to 3 times the throughput of competing offerings. So we've gotten a lot of good feedback from people that have used the product, and they definitely noticed a difference with release 2.0. So all those things serve to provide a very solid foundation for a good operating system with consistent performance. And so once you have that, if you have an effective QoS scheme, then you've got a solution that can deliver value-added services. And our QoS scheme is relatively simple, but it's quite effective and very configurable. We have 3 priority levels. The highest priority level is reserved for voice packets, and those are automatically detected by the system based on the way they're marked. And we give high priority to the voice packets both within the radios themselves. Those traffic flows are prioritized higher than the other traffic flows, but also in access to the media or access to resources by the radios that have VoIP packets to send. We have built that into the system. And then there's 2 other priority schemes, a high priority and then a lowest priority or best effort, where traffic flows can be assigned to those priority levels based on how they're marked. eCommand is a name we've given to a set of capabilities that are available with the ePMP that help people deploying networks plan, provision, and monitor their networks. It's an area of focus for us going forward. We've had a lot of good capabilities already in the product, and we're continuing to enhance them with software updates. We have a tool that's called the ePMP Capacity Planner. This is an Excel-based tool that can be downloaded from our website, and it allows people who want to deploy networks to do some kind of what-ifs, to get a good feel for what kind of performance they could get from ePMP solutions based on the distances between devices, transmit power levels, antenna gains, and also the expected level of interference. So once you get a good feel for the capabilities of the solution, you can move to the next step, which is to use the link planner tool to plan your ePMP network. Now, if you're at all familiar with Cambium products, especially the point-to-point products, you're probably familiar with Link Planner. It's a very popular tool. It's a free tool that's available at our website that until recently allowed you to plan the orthogon point-to-point links, their deployments, and give you a lot of confidence in the performance you'd get when you deploy them. So all those capabilities are now available for planning point-to-multipoint networks, both the ePMP and the PMP 450. So you can easily import some location information about where your radios are located. You view path profiles based on terrain data that's in Google Earth, and then you can make some adjustments to your configuration and optimize your paths, with different antenna heights and that sort of thing. And once you've got a system designed, you can export information from the link planner into the capacity planner, which will help you estimate the capacity of your system. And then the tool will also help you create a bill of materials and generate proposals. So if you're a value-added reseller, let's say, and you've got a video surveillance deployment that you want to use the ePMP for, or the PMP 450, this tool will now help you plan your network, generate a proposal to your end customer, and help you win the business. So if you haven't done so, I would encourage you to check it out. It's really a great tool. We also have a few other unique capabilities within the ePMP to help you manage your network. One of these is a tool we call eDetect, and this is a tool which is unique that runs in the background along with normal operation of the ePMP solution, and it measures interference that is being seen on the channel that the radio operates on, and it will identify the radios by their MAC address if they're providing interference. And then it provides an easy-to-read stoplight status that shows you whether the link is operating in a good area, meaning you've got very high signal-to-noise and therefore high throughput, or if it's in a bad area where you've got low signal-to-noise, or in between. So it gives you a quick visual indication of potential trouble spots in your network and allows you to drill down and find out who's causing problems. We also have a element management system we call the CNS that is available for free and supports device discovery and monitoring of ePMP networks, as well as software upgrade and device configuration. So we also have, Cambium has some existing legacy tools both for element management and software updating called Wireless Manager and CNUT, and those both now support the ePMP. Wireless Manager is a product that we sell. It's a very sophisticated management system. But if you want something that you can download at no cost and do some management of the ePMP, the CNS is the tool for you. And finally, let's talk about reliability. Cambium prides itself on having very highly reliable outdoor wireless solutions, regardless of the cost of the product. And the way we do that is we follow a particular recipe for designing highly reliable solutions. And even though the ePMP is a low-cost solution, we've applied that recipe to the ePMP as well. We start out by making sure that we design with margin, so we're not stressing components or the way we've designed the system beyond what it's supposed to perform. We choose high-quality components. We add ESD and surge protection to the radio so that they're not delicate and can be easily damaged. We put them in a robust, weatherproof enclosure. We have a lot of experience at doing that from our 10 years in the business. We pride ourselves on our robust design verification. Earlier in the presentation, I showed a picture of a wall of ePMP radios. So this is just one example of the kind of verification we do on our solutions before we release them to the field. And in addition, we also focus a lot on verifying the reliability of the solution. We do what's called accelerated life testing, where we take samples of radios before we release them to the field. And we put them through temperature and voltage and environmental extremes, and we basically try to break them. And when we break them, we identify what was the cause of the fault, and it's usually then it's a way to tease out the weak points in the design, and we address them, those weak points. We fix them, and this way we end up with a very highly reliable solution. And then finally, we manufacture these products at a high-quality manufacturer, and we have continual monitoring of the output of the manufacturer to make sure that every product is reliable. So the ePMP, we pride ourselves on our reliability, and we've taken a lot of steps to make sure that it's a reliable solution. So I've talked a lot about the product, and there's a lot of capabilities in there that make it very flexible. So there's a lot of different applications that people can use it for. Basically, any application where you need some wide area, high performance IP connectivity, and wireless is a good solution, is a great application for the ePMP. Most obvious solution is as the access layer in a wireless internet service provider network. We have a loyal customer of Cambium, Silo Wireless, out of Ontario, Canada, who's uses some Cambium products at the core of its network. But for many years was using a variety of low-cost solutions at the edge of their network where there was some lower density. And those solutions needed a technology upgrade, and so they selected the ePMP to replace them. And the reason they did was that they understand the value of GPS sync and frequency reuse, and that was something they really wanted in a solution. They also offer voice services, so they wanted a solution that had consistent performance and had a good QoS scheme that would support their voice communications. And then they would occasionally run into external interference, even if they are in rural areas. There are competitors in that area, so they needed a solution that was high performance, even under conditions of external interference. And they found all of those in the ePMP. CCTV, or video surveillance, is also a great application for the ePMP. One of our earliest deployments was in Seattle, Washington. There was, in a portion of the city, there was an economic development zone where the city was providing funds in order to help some businesses get started there. And they needed a very kind of a small-scale video surveillance network on a very small budget to help provide security. And so one of our partners, Cascade Networks, went in there and they picked the ePMP to deliver that video surveillance solution. And the reason was, what they liked about it was that it was easy to deploy, that the radios could be used, the same radio could be used as a point-to-point radio, an access point, or an SM. And there was one or two spots where they needed to do some synchronization, so having that feature was key as well. We have a number of other deployments outside the U.S. and Canada of this solution. And actually, what we find is that those environments can oftentimes be much more challenging deployment areas than areas in the U.S. or Canada. There's much less attention paid to deploying products that meet RF regulations, and so the level of interference that you'll see in those environments can be extremely high. And so what we found is that we have a number of customers who picked the ePMP to deploy in this scenario, again because of the ability to do frequency reuse. It lets them find small slices of clear spectrum and deploy some very high-capacity networks. So here's an example of a deployment in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where they needed a technology upgrade, and they were able to get a significant boost in capacity. And then we had a customer in Hungary that in their town centers, the subscriber density can be quite dense, and yet some of the areas are a bit economically challenged, and so what a subscriber is willing to pay for broadband is pretty limited. So they needed a very low-cost solution that had high scalability, and they chose the ePMP because of what it can deliver. So these are just a few examples of the deployment scenarios and the applications in which you can use the ePMP. But we've designed it to be flexible, and so really it's up to your imagination in terms of what the applications are. So just a very quick summary before I turn it back to Richard for some Q&A. The ePMP is the newest member of the Cambium family of products. It's an alternative solution to other low-cost solutions out there, but it's been designed with Cambium quality and reliability, and incorporates what we consider to be really essential features in a point-to-multipoint solution that network operators can deploy where they can grow their networks without running into roadblocks and barriers. So thank you for your attention, and now I'll turn it over to Richard for some Q&A.
Wow, John, that's a lot of information, a lot of good information. I appreciate the presentation. We have gotten an enormous number of questions, which tells me people are very interested in this product and what it can do. So I'm going to turn to some of those in just a moment. I want to go over a few things before I begin. The number one question I get on all webinars that Streakwave does, there was a lot of information here. How do I get a copy of the presentation? How do I watch this again? I'm interested in showing this to my engineer or someone else in my business or one of my customers. Where or how do I do that? The simple answer is that we record these webinars and we make them publicly available after a short edit to make sure that they're clean and capable of being seen really well. And there's two sources that you can go to in order to see this. It takes us anywhere from 24 to 48 hours to get the product up online. It is free and on demand. So the first place you can go always is to streakwave.com. Webinars show up in a couple of different places. If you go to what we call the landing page or the site for the manufacturer that you're interested in, and then click on that manufacturer and come to the landing page, you'll find a section for videos and webinars. Very simple, just click through and you can watch it right there. Secondly, the YouTube channel, it's www.youtube.com/Streakwave. We have an extensive library of webinars, videos, educational information, and presentations that you can access on a whole range of topics and products. And the last place I'll point you to is our Learning Center on Streakwave. If you come to the tabs on the top and drop down to the drop-down menu, you can go to the Learning Center, and many of our educational pieces and webinars are posted there as well. So give us just a few hours or maybe a day or so after the presentation, and it'll all be present. Let's go from there. We have a lot of questions. So if you have a question and it's not answered today, we'll try and get through them, but if it's not answered today, you can always feel free to call Streakwave directly or go onto the Cambium website or our website to get further information at streakwave.com or 888-604-5234. We'll also do our best to offline answer some of the questions that are very specific to your specific needs and may not address specific things for the general audience. Let's begin with GPS sync. So this is a very strong feature of this product, and I gather the product comes in both a sync-oriented and a non-sync-oriented option. What's different about this sync than any other sync that's on the marketplace, and why should I choose Cambium for that?
Well, not all GPS synchronized solutions are created equal. And you really need the full implementation of those three aspects that I mentioned in the presentation in order to get the full benefit, which is frequency reuse. You need the GPS synchronized protocol layer, and that's in many cases the only thing that's implemented in the solution. But if you what you also need is you need the power control, automatic power control of the subscriber modules, and you need high quality antennas. And when you have all three of those together, you get frequency reuse.
Now, we were asked about the antennas. You have two different versions of the ePMP, a connectorized version and an integrated version. But GPS is a different animal. Do you need a separate antenna of any kind for GPS, or is the GPS optimized through the antenna system that's integrated in the antenna or the connectorized antenna?
Yeah, well, the radio that comes with the integrated antenna is actually what we call an unsynchronized radio. So it can be the access point in an unsynchronized deployment, which is can be fine if your deployment is limited to a single access point, or if it's a point-to-point link. But if you want to use the GPS synchronization, you need to buy the GPS synced radio, which is connectorized, and then you need to utilize a sector antenna. And you can use a third-party sector antenna. We don't really recommend that because many of them don't have the required isolation between the front and the back that lets you do frequency reuse. So we highly recommend the use of the ePMP antennas in order to get that capability.
But what if I'm already installed, I already have my sector antennas up, and I need to replace a radio? It is okay to use that radio as a replacement, right?
It is okay. If that radio has a front-to-back ratio, and that should be available from your spec sheet for that antenna, but it has a front-to-back ratio that's greater than 30 dB, and some of the antennas out there do, they just tend to be very expensive, then you can do frequency reuse back-to-back. If it doesn't, then we would recommend within that cell not doing frequency reuse. So if you had, let's say, a deployment with three 120-degree antennas, you could connect up an ePMP radio to those antennas and assign 3 different channels, and it would work just fine.
So let's turn a little bit away from the synchronization to the use of the radio itself. You said that properly configured, you could put 120 subscriber units per AP and have it operate. Can you talk about the QoS that goes with that, the ability to prioritize, and can voice services be maintained across the ePMP if that's the case, especially in busy times?
Yes, it can. So the reason we can maintain high-quality voice communications is that we give priority to the voice traffic. Now, the voice traffic tends to be, from a bandwidth perspective, a small part of what you would see in a system. So as long as you have a prioritization scheme that's effective, then you can deliver voice. And the way ours is it's unique is a lot of solutions will prioritize voice higher than data within the radios themselves, and that's necessary for high-quality VoIP transmission, but it's not sufficient. What you need to do, especially when you have a large number of subscriber devices, trying to get bandwidth from an access point, is the access point also needs to prioritize access to the bandwidth to the devices that at that moment have voice data that needs to be sent. So that's a capability that is built into the ePMP.
Let's shift a little bit to the type of channels that are used and on which frequencies. You had mentioned 40 megahertz channels. First off, is the radio capable? Can you select a smaller channel if you want a 20 megahertz channel, or do you have to stick with a 40 megahertz channel?
Sure. The software that's available today, you can configure either a 20 megahertz or a 40 megahertz channel. And what
would be the throughput difference?
So at the highest modulation, you would get over 100 megabits per second in a 20 megahertz channel and 200 megabits per second in a 40 megahertz channel. We have a software release which will come out near the end of October, where we will make available 5 and 10 megahertz channels. So if people want to operate the ePMP in smaller slices of spectrum, that capability will be out in late October.
Excellent. So that provides you a pretty good range of flexibility depending upon where you're using this. Let's talk about that also. So you mentioned various places around the world. So I gather there's a world version of this available and a U.S. version that has gone through FCC approval. Talk a little bit about that, then talk about how weatherproof these are. A lot of our guys, they deploy things in pretty stiff weather conditions, sometimes very, very cold, sometimes very, very hot, sometimes very, very wind-oriented. How rugged is this, and what's available?
Sure. So, yes, the FCC has some pretty strict requirements on radios that are sold within the U.S., and so all manufacturers create a U.S.-specific radio SKU, and so we're no different. And what that radio SKU does is it limits the user from configuring the radio for to operate outside of the FCC regulations. In other parts of the world, and Canada is one of those other parts of the world, the regulations are not as strict. Certainly there are regulations that need to be met, but we're not required to sell a radio specifically for Canada. And so if you're in Canada, what you would want to order is what we call the ROW, or Rest of the World radio. And then in the U.S., you're limited to access to the FCC radio. Both of them work very well. It's just that the ROW radio has a little bit more flexibility in the configuration. And then, Richard, the second part of your question was the robustness of the product. So we have tested the enclosure of our radios to environmental standards, and there's a set of standards that's called the IP standards, and the rating that we've achieved on the ePMP enclosures is IP55, which means that it's impervious to water getting into the radio. It can't be submerged. That's a higher rating, and we don't meet that. But in terms of any type of wind and rain, the product is completely weatherproof. And then we also do rate the pole attachment mechanisms of the radios to certain wind loads. And our typical rating is that we achieve is 200 kilometers per hour, so it will survive those types of wind gusts.
Excellent. Go a little further on that. You mentioned the word mounting. How are these mounted? Do they come with a mounting assembly? What's the recommended mounting for these?
Right. Well, so if you want to use the radio with either one of the sector antennas we sell or the force dish, then the mounting mechanism that's required is included with the radio and or the dish. Basically, the radio mounts to the antenna, and then the antenna mounts to a pole. We sell a connectorized radio, and if you want to use that with a third-party antenna, then you need to purchase a small mounting bracket for the antenna, put that onto a pole, and that's available also from our distributors, and it's a pretty inexpensive device. The integrated radio has a mounting mechanism that slips into the back of it, where it can be mounted to a pole. And we also, Cambium also sells sort of a pole kit that some people purchase to, if they want to install a radio on a roof, we have an option available for them. But then there are also a lot of different solutions on the market, not from Cambium, and we work with all of those as well.
So I'm going to turn to a little bit more touchy subject. It's asked by a lot of people on this particular webinar. Cambium has sold point-to-point, point-to-multipoint products for years. Their successor to Motorola. Why would I choose ePMP, other than just talking about price? Why would I choose ePMP over the traditional, say, 450 or other Cambium products? What's the reasoning for choosing one side or the other of the house, and are they compatible?
So yeah, I mean, what we have is we have a range of solutions depending upon what type of performance you need, what type of features and robustness. And there is some overlap between the solutions, right? There are some applications where, you know, for example, both a PMP 450 and a ePMP could work equally well. So, and we usually get this question most often with regards to when should I use PMP 450 and when should I use ePMP. And the way I usually answer it is that the PMP 450 is for a case where efficiency is very important. It's probably the most efficient solution on the market today. It does in terms of point-to-multipoint. For example, it supports 256 QAM modulation, which means that in a 20 megahertz channel, you can get 125 megabits per second, whereas the ePMP supports the 64 QAM, so it's 100. So if you need that extra efficiency, if you need that extra bit of bandwidth in the 20 megahertz channel, then the 450 is the solution. Also, the PMP 450 is really, it's a evolution of the Canopy line, which is means that it carries along with it the feature set and the graphical user interface that are available with Canopy products, and that has a lot of appeal to certain customers. So it really depends on efficiency and the level of scalability that you need to achieve. The ePMP has got, you know, is much more efficient and scalable than the competition in its cost category, but the 450 goes that much further.
Are they compatible, or do you need to keep them separate?
Well, they don't.
And the ePMP.
Yeah, they don't interoperate today. Meaning you can't connect a subscriber module from the ePMP to the 450. There's compatibility in terms of some of the management capabilities. For example, I mentioned that our wireless manager solution, which is an element management solution, can actually manage both the ePMP and the PMP 450. One of the areas of compatibility which is will be coming available in the not too distant future is the ability for those solutions to synchronize with each other. That's something that we're working on and that we may introduce in the future. Right now, the frame structures are different enough that when you deploy them, you need to put say a guard band in between the deployments. But we're working to address that.
So that's a good place to talk about the roadmap here. You currently have a 2.4 gigahertz and a 5 gigahertz option. They're separate from one another. You have a connectorized and an unconnectorized and a synced and unsynced version. What's on the future? What's on the horizon for ePMP and Cambium products in general?
Well, the 2.4 gigahertz solution needs some additional antenna options. So what we have, what we're looking at is introducing, you know, a ePMP force for the 2.4 gigahertz solution. That probably won't come until early next year, but we're working on it. We're also continuing to evolve the software, and one of the areas of focus that we have is on helping, putting some software features in that will help people migrate from current solutions they may have to the ePMP. And so one of the things that I mentioned earlier was the smaller channel sizes that will help people migrate. But we're also will be introducing in the not too distant future the ability to run an ePMP client in a standard Wi-Fi mode. And so this is something that will help people during a migration step from other solutions to the ePMP. So that's what I can talk about now, and of course we will be also following the 802.11 technology curve. And so when the technology is ready, I think for the capabilities that we have on the ePMP, will be evolving to an 802.11 AC solution, but nothing definite that we can announce in terms of timetable.
We always like to get the scoop here, but it sounds like those things are coming and something to watch for.
Yeah.
Someone just asked a question that is actually a really good one. They're all good ones, but let's look at this one for a second. Is there any down the road look at doing a licensed solution as well? Currently, this is an unlicensed solution.
Right. Well, we're always looking for frequency bands where it makes sense for us to develop these products. So we're evaluating other spectrum, but nothing that we can announce at this point.
So you mentioned the link planner and a bunch of other tools. What kind of, let's talk about support for a minute. What kind of support can I get from Cambium post-sale? I can certainly attest to the pre-sale support that we can provide through StreakWave. Talk a little bit about where they can get support if they need information on which products to buy, how to deploy them better, what kind of support. We mentioned the link planner and the other tools, which by the way are free, and where you can get to them.
Sure. So we have at the Cambium website, if you navigate to the support area, there's a specific page for the ePMP. And on that, I would say that's your first stop for support. On that page, you can download the user manuals. We have some app notes. We have some videos. And all the other tools that you mentioned, Link Planner and the Capacity Planner, those are there. There's also a Cambium customer forum where you can pose questions, and we have people that monitor that, and we've really kind of stepped up our engagement in terms of responding to questions on that, as well as issues that are sometimes raised on some of the industry forums. So those are always good sources. And then we have we do have a support center that is staffed 7/24 that you can either send an email to or call in to get some help. And then we have a process where issues that can't be resolved by our support center are escalated to what we call our Tier 3 support, and these are our engineers that sit right in the R&D lab with the engineers that are developing the product, and they're very highly skilled and can solve most any problem, or they can pull in the experts who actually wrote the software or designed the hardware. So different ways that you can get support after your sale and during your deployment.
Excellent. I'd love to continue with the Q&A, but we make a promise at StreakWave webinars to keep these to an hour, so I'm going to wrap up. I want to thank John Butler from Cambium for giving a strong presentation about the ePMP line. Lot there, a lot to come. If you want to see the product portfolio itself, I encourage you to come to streakwave.com, look up under Cambium Networks, and you'll find a whole section on the landing page for ePMP as well as other Cambium products. The Cambium website is a great resource for the link planner, as well as information and white papers, which we also have available, and videos and these webinars. A reminder, if you want to purchase product or need to ask questions about your particular situation, you can call StreakWave at 888-604-5234 or come online and ask questions there. StreakWave webinars provides open discussion about products and brands and lines and technology that are of interest to the wireless world. We're very pleased to have you here today. We hope you've learned something from this. Again, thank you, John Butler. Thank you, all of you who have attended. Thank you for your questions. One last time, if your question wasn't answered, we'll do our best to get back with you afterwards. Thank you for the load of questions that we did get on this particular webinar. One last time, this webinar and the information on it will be provided on demand at streakwave.com and on YouTube/streakwave. For any other questions, please feel free to get a hold of us. Thank you for coming, and have a wonderful day, everybody.